Okay, so I have Mark here. We'll have all his links down below in the description. So you can give a brief introduction before we get started with the interview.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Marc Freccero. I am both a YouTuber and a musician. And I originally got involved with Lyft and Uber years ago. I first started driving, I think it was in 2015. And I think, like a lot of people, I looked at it as a great way to make side cash, great way to make money while having a flexible schedule. And I did so while also pursuing, my entrepreneurial pursuits of YouTube and music and a lot more. And it was an insane way to get started into all that. And it was an awesome kind of a job to have, especially paired with everything else.
All right, awesome. Would you rather focus on like Uber or Lyft or or both?
So what do I say to a lot of drivers is to first off make sure you sign up with both. This is huge. The reason why is, and I said this before in a bunch of other videos, anyone who's seen my videos on YouTube is going to know what I'm about to say. The number one factor that determines how much money you can make with Lyft and Uber is your location, which is kind of unfortunate because if you live in an area that's not as good for Lyft and Uber, that just sucks as opposed to an area that is good. There's a great site called Rideshare. They do surveys almost every year looking at the Lyft and Uber income. And what's interesting is even in the same area, Uber might pay a lot more than Lyft or vice versa. In addition, on like a random Friday night, Lyft might be paying more. Maybe the next weekend, Uber might be paying more on that exact same Friday night. And in addition, both apps have bonuses. This is a big thing when it comes to ride sharing. And when you look at these bonus structures, sometimes Uber's having a bonus, but Lyft is not, vice versa. Sometimes they're both having a bonus, and you can get both. My number one biggest pro tip right away: sign up with both apps. I can't say if one is necessarily better than another because that can change from day to day, week to week, or even hour by hour.
Okay, yeah, for sure. I think that's good advice. So if you were to look at like how much you made your first week driving Uber versus how much you made your first week driving Lyft, do you know like do you remember how much you made or like which was better?
I'd have to, so I started to give like a timestamp to this. This was, like I said, in 2015, it was in Boston. I originally started with Lyft. From what I heard from a lot of people, Lyft was the more friendly app. Uber was the more like unfriendly app. I'm not saying if I agree or disagree with that, but that's what I was told. And I'd say when I started out with Lyft in Boston, 2015, on average, I'd say I made anywhere between 20 and 25 an hour. I don't remember exactly how much I made the first week, but what was interesting, I don't know if they still do this, being honest, like I don't live in Boston anymore, but Lyft was doing something when I started out called hourly guarantees. So what they would say is, I think it was 7 and 9 a.m. and 5 to 7 p.m. during the week. They said, hey, if you drive during this period of time, you have a 90% acceptance rate, and you do at least one ride in each hour, we'll bump you up to minimum X amount an hour. I believe the starting rate was minimum 30 an hour. After Lyft took its cut, I think that came out to be, I believe it was 24 an hour. So I
Oh wow.
typically would drive in the morning commutes, 7 to 9 a.m., just because I love that minimum hourly guarantee, 5 to 7 p.m. And then, of course, on Friday and Saturday nights, if I was free, then I'd do that. But I think I started around, if I had to guess, 20, 25 an hour, and I started with Lyft.
Okay. Oh, they should I didn't even know they did that.
Yeah, I wish they would bring it back. It was awesome because there was a period of time, and also as we can imagine, when it comes to snow and winter, you make more money. There are some weeks where they'd say, "Hey, minimum 60 an hour guaranteed," and I do one ride from 7 to, let's say, 8 a.m., and that one ride would be $20, and I'd get bumped up to 60. So I think that's
Oh,
why they stopped
nice.
doing that. They probably lost like a ton of money, but I think it was their way to incentivize drivers to get on the road, especially as ride sharing was just kind of coming about.
Yeah, definitely. There's actually this app called Solo. I don't know if you've heard of
So
it.
no.
Um, this they're like one of our sponsors, but Solo actually has pay guarantee
Oh wait, I'm gonna write this down
and
actually. Is it like a ride sharing type app, like Lyft and Uber, or does it have like a different like
it
structure?
it's like its own app that helps other like helps like gig workers and rideshare drivers. So you can link your gig account, whether it's like DoorDash or Instacart, Uber, Lyft.
Gotcha.
And in some cities, it's not available everywhere yet.
Mhm.
They'll like give you an estimate of your pay per hour at
That's
like different
huge.
hours, depending on like the traffic and just like a lot of things. And then they'll actually pay you the difference if you don't meet that estimate. So it's like having zero.
Whoa,
Yeah, so we
that's
have a link
huge.
down below in the description.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to do some research on that. That's awesome, honestly, because yeah, that was the most unfortunate thing I think about Lyft and Uber, and this is gonna sound kind of weird. When I was driving a lot, I realized that I looked at myself more as a salesman, so to speak, than a driver. Like in my mind, I was selling my services as a rideshare driver. And as a result, and every driver knows this, there'd be some hours I'd make, a good amount of money. Some hours, I mean, depending, like say if it was an off hour, I make only like $5. Then when you factor in you're an independent contractor, taxes, depreciation on your car, it's like I'm making next to nothing. That's really cool. I'm gonna have to check that out. That's awesome.
Yeah, also, if you use the link in the description, you'll get $15 just for free
Oh,
after you use
nice.
the gig account. So,
Oh, I'll check it out.
yeah. But anyways, um, so kind of looking at like the downsides of Uber and Lyft, like what are some things you dislike about driving for them? Or like are there some things that you like more or less comparing Uber and Lyft to each other?
Ooh, so starting off with the Uber versus Lyft comparison, I equally like both apps. Like, if I had to be honest, like, I don't, like I said, I remember hearing, oh, Lyft is the more friendly one, Uber is the more unfriendly one, or whatever. I think that's just like a weird myth. I equally have a good time driving for both. My biggest thing, probably like a lot of other drivers, is at that moment, which one's paying the most? That's pretty much my number one thing. And it does fluctuate, whether it's bonuses or whatever. When it comes to the negative side effects in terms of driving for Uber and Lyft, there are a few. I think the biggest one is you're not getting paid now as much as you used to. I think a lot of drivers know that. The whole independent contractor versus employee debate has also been a big one. Prop 22 just happened in California. And as a result, drivers do stay as independent contractors. Most drivers don't like that. Some drivers do. It really depends. So there's a lot of tricky legal things as well. I will also say, which is another really interesting one that I feel like most people don't think about when it comes to driving, is actually the health effects. I noticed that when I would drive for a while, like say if I was doing like a big day, like say, or better yet, big night, whereas like say starting at 5 p.m. on a Friday night, doing the evening commutes to 7 p.m., then continuing to like say 2 or 3 a.m., maybe even 4 a.m., that like my back would start to hurt. I found I was
Oh,
very
yeah.
dehydrated too. So yeah, so those are some negative side effects that I think are not as well talked about. Obviously, too, just unfortunate statistics. The fact that when you're on the road more, you're more likely to be involved in an accident or whatever. Obviously, hopefully, nothing like that ever happens. I've never been involved in an accident while driving. Huge knock on wood there. But that's another thing to keep in mind. I think the biggest thing though, when you talk to a lot of drivers, is they're not being compensated enough for their driving, especially compared to when I first started driving in 2015. The money was really good, and just especially for how little you were driving and everything. And I know different drivers have different perspectives. I bet you probably see this on your channel a lot. I try to read as many comments as I can, and I'll have comment wars with some drivers saying, "Oh my God, I love driving. I make insane money. I'm not working that much. I have a flexible schedule. I love Lyft and Uber." And then someone will comment under it. YouTube comments will be like, "F you, you're making this up. Lyft and Uber does not pay anything," and also they'll argue with each other. And like I said in the beginning of this, the number one factor is your location. By far, that determines how much money you can make. And that's why, in a weird way, both drivers are actually right. Just their own perspectives and own location has a big factor on that. But at the end of the day, I think for a lot of drivers, the biggest downside really comes down to money. That's, I think, the number one thing by far.
Yeah, definitely. Why do you think drivers end up quitting? Like, like I know a lot of drivers have been quitting recently.
Uh, I think it depends on the driver themselves. I'd say one, I think the money, to bring that kind of point back home. I think the money. I think the second thing that is becoming more and more apparent now I think it's also the logistics around driving, and I'm going to say the legal aspects, and I think also the accounting aspects. So when it comes to legal aspects, I want to stress I'm not a lawyer. This is not legal advice. I am a former accountant, but this is not meant to be accounting advice either. But when it comes to the legal aspects, I mean, the independent contractor versus employee debate's a big one, like I said before. Some drivers you now may need to have like I think it's called like a TNC verification in I believe it's New York, so each city and state has its own rules. Some of them are more strict than others. That's kind of a big issue. Also, rideshare insurance is a big thing. I highly suggest getting rideshare insurance. There are stories of people getting into an accident when driving. They tell their insurance didn't know they were driving, and their insurance says, hey, we're not going to cover you. And unfortunately, for a lot of insurances, they're going to try to do whatever they can to not cover you. And it's debatable if they're right or wrong in that regard, but that is another big factor. And then, of course, when it comes to the tax accounting, a lot of drivers are kind of not used to being an independent contractor, where for most situations, you give money at the end of the tax season as opposed to getting that money back because you're not taxed on your earnings, or you're not getting those taxes taken out when you get your paycheck. So I think there's a lot of things around it that at first it seems great. Like, I drive, flexible schedule, instant cash outs, I think are a very underrated part of Lyft and Uber. That's awesome. Let's say I made $100 in a day. I hit a button, boom, it's in my bank account. There's a lot of benefits, but there are a lot of like logistical cons and negative aspects as well. And I think that when you pair that with the money, a lot of drivers are saying, wow, with all this kind of negative stuff involved, why risk it from you making peanuts or, such little money when it comes to driving?
Yeah, because I know like Uber and Lyft take a pretty big percentage, and
Yeah,
then also like spending money on like gas, maintenance for your car, stuff like that.
it adds up. I mean, I know people, I mean, this is like a whole other arena, but I know people who rent a car and they have their own car just because of, those matters like depreciation, like the value of your car is insane. I bought a new car few years ago. And I remember one of the first things they asked me when I was trading in my other vehicle, because I was doing like a swap at a dealership. One of the first questions they asked me was, has this car ever been used for Uber and Lyft? If so, we're going to give you less money for it. Because we assume there's been more wear and tear. The car's maybe gone through a lot. Whether that's true or not, obviously, like I feel like driving the city is the same, whether it's the Uber Lyft or another, or
Yeah.
not for Uber and Lyft. But yeah, that's a big thing. Dealerships are now asking, like the depreciation is a huge factor.
Hmm. That's interesting. I didn't even know that.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. But I know
Yeah, weird.
insurance companies are doing that now too, so I think I mean, it's tough to say, but I think in the beginning, Lyft and Uber is so new. A lot of people were like, we don't know what to think of this. So it kind of like went under the radar when it comes to insurance, trading in your car, all those kind of things. But now that it's so mainstream, there's more like, in both good and bad ways, more like focus on it as just something a lot of people do.
Do you have any tips for drivers?
So there's a bunch of tips I can give. I guarantee there's a bunch on your channel as well that are amazing pieces of advice. My number one tip, if I had to give one, because also there's a bunch of them, is analytics. That's by far, in terms of, besides signing up with both apps, which I know I mentioned, what I suggest, and this is actually what I did when I first started driving, is I actually had like a spreadsheet, and I track when I make the most amount of money and when I make the least amount of money. And I think the best advice I have for a lot of drivers, among a lot of things, is just not drive aimlessly and always try to look at a lot of the analytics, because that's the way you can make the most amount of money in your area. Regardless of your location, some areas are going to have better stuff going on or not as good stuff going on, right? For lack of better explanation. I think a good tool as well, even if you don't drive for them, is Lyft. So on the Lyft app, they actually have a couple of different features where they show you maybe like the best day to drive, the best time. They show you events in your area. You can make a killing doing an event, let's say Wednesday at 9 p.m. Probably not going to make an insane amount of money. But if there's like a Lady Gaga concert, it's going to be probably a gold mine, right? So even if you don't drive for Lyft, you can still pull up the app, look at all the analytics on the app in terms of what they're suggesting, maybe peak hours, good times to drive, events, et cetera, et cetera. And then if you want to go drive for Uber, go for it. I think just looking at when you drive and how much money you're making is the way that I, especially when I first started driving, started to make more money, just because I was like, okay, I drove during this period of time. It sucked. Not going to do it again. I'm now going to only drive during like these periods of time.
Okay, yeah. Well, that's some really good advice. I actually never thought about like logging and tracking everything.
Yeah.
Like the first tip you said, that's really smart though, because then yeah, you can like actually see like all the best times and days and everything in, like areas.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like a weird, like almost like nerdy pro tip having like, I literally had like Excel pulled up with like different like columns and whatnot. But like that taught me in Boston, like, okay, this is a good time to drive. This is not a good time to drive. And I think over time, it just allowed me to be like, all right, I'm going to treat it, like going to work. I know a lot of drivers do this, where I realized morning, evening commutes, Friday and Saturday nights. Also realized, a couple other pro tips. I like to call these the pregame hours, which is something I didn't expect would exist until I started keeping track. Is sometimes I found, like, say on a Friday and Saturday night, typically from like 5 or 6 p.m. till about 9 p.m. I found was like the cutoff, so to speak, for pregame hours. The surges can be pretty high because what are people doing? They're going to their friend's place. They haven't started drinking yet, but they're going to get ready. They're going, like, say, out to dinner, and that's where they're starting. They're going to their friend's place, but they haven't started drinking yet, and they're just going there to get ready and everything. And that was a good time to drive because one, sometimes the surges would be high. Sometimes, depending on the night, sometimes even higher than deep into the night, just because I think not a lot of drivers are on the road or whatever. But also, too, I know a lot of drivers, and understandably so, are like, I don't want to drive around drunk people. I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to deal with people puking in my car,
Yeah,
potentially, whatever. And those like were a great period of time. Another one is Saturday and Sunday mornings. You might still have someone puking in your car, to say that as like a side note, but those are potential times as well, because people wake up, they crash at their friend's place, they crash wherever they're going out, or they want to, like, say, go out for a brunch or Sunday fun day to grab some mimosas or whatever. That was like another great time to drive. So like there's a lot of cool pockets that you can time out well that do make a lot of money as well.
yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I didn't even think about that either, but like, yeah, whenever I'm like gonna go out, if I know people are gonna be drinking, like we obviously Uber, so then we don't have the car, like,
Yeah.
yeah. All right, well, do you have any like final thoughts you want to share or just anything else?
Ooh. I'd say for final thoughts, like, say if someone's watching this and, like, say, considering driving, let's come from it from that angle. I'd say my best advice is, one, test it out. That's the first thing, is sign up with both apps. Second thing is use someone else's code. I know that a lot of YouTubers say that and they're really saying it so people use their code. Use your friend's code, doesn't matter. The reason why is when I signed up, it was in like peak bonus heaven. Like there was a period of time where if you signed up and I think did like one ride, you get like $1,000. I got nothing for my bonuses because I didn't use someone else's code, whether it's your friend's code, whether it's, something that you find online, use a code that we get like a bonus. And hey, if you, like, say, want to drive, get that bonus and then never drive again, you can do that. But I think the biggest thing I suggest to people is test it out. Maybe if you have your own car, which obviously makes it a lot easier, sign up with both apps, drive maybe for a week, test it out. If you like it, awesome. If not, then obviously you don't have to do it ever again. But I think that Lyft and Uber, that sometimes gets a lot of pros and cons to it. Obviously throughout this, we've talked about the good and the bad, but there are a lot of amazing benefits to Lyft and Uber. It was super helpful for me when I was doing a lot in Boston, when I was trying to hustle on music and YouTube and everything I'm doing now. It's a phenomenal job, and obviously people have a different love-hate relationship with it, but you won't know until you try.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having
Yeah.
me.
Again, we'll have all of Mark's links down below in the description.